I will say it again. Successful people have failed. Successful people will fail. Successful people don't give up. You're about to hear about how low you can go before becoming the top of the game. Ken Guest is next.
This is A Dash of Grit. Recipes for success from courageous leaders who overcome challenges and build great things. Now, podcasting from Spire to leaders in local communities like yours, here is Brian Leflock.
And let's get cooking. Folks, I'm a salesman. I don't know if you know that or not. I'm proud of it. I hope that if you're a salesman, you are proud of it too, because I think it's one of the greatest professions that you can have. And I'm thrilled today to talk sales and talk grit. And I think those two things go together with Ken Guest. He is our guest today. He's the Chief Revenue Officer and partner at the Ruby Group Sandler Training in Akron, Ohio. He is amazing. I've worked with him in the past, and you're going to like hearing from him. He's also written 2 books, Digital Prospecting, which is almost, and I say almost, a Bible because nothing touches the Bible. Also Selling in Manufacturing and Logistics. He is an in-demand speaker, a sales trainer, my friend, and our guest today on Dash of Grit. Welcome, Ken Guest.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being on.
And I'm glad you're here. I make no bones about it. Sales is hard. And Sandler Training has worked with Spire Marketing for many years and worked with me on sales training and trying to make me better at what I do. And you're a big part of that. And I get to work with you ever so often and learn from you. And I hope that our listeners will be able to learn a few things about grit from you today. Before we get into that story and the past and hurdles and hardships, talk about success. Things are going great for you. And I want you to kind of set yourself up because you've accomplished great things. And before we talk about the hardships, let's talk about the good stuff first.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. Our franchise is over 20 years old now, our Sandler franchise. We've grown to be one of the top 5 in the world out of, I believe there are about 250 offices right now. And very fortunate in Ohio to have this success. I've been part of the organization for a little over 10 years now. And I guess the most gratifying thing is when a client says to you, you've helped me in my personal life as much as my professional life with some of the things you've taught me. And that is, watching companies grow and being part of that organization. I'm very fortunate. I also would say one of the things I love to do is when I start working with a client is just to become part of their ambassadorship, if you will. So, if I work with a particular company, I'm all in. I want their products in my home. I want to be kind of part of that culture, and that's a fun part of what I do.
Yeah, and you do it very well, and the company does it very well. Tell me more about becoming number 5 in the world. And I know well enough if you're number 5, you want to be number 4. But for now, that's thrilling. How do you become number 5 out of that many in such a large organization?
Well, I think we attributed a lot to the longevity, the relationships we have, a lot of sales training, whether it's Sandler or any other thing is an event, right? So it's you come in, you do some training, and then you're done. We really want to turn our relationships into coaching, guiding, consulting, things like that, where we're helping people in all areas of the organization. Sales related and leadership related. So a lot of the relationships we have and that I have personally are 7, 8, 9, 10 years in, and still, we're still partnering. And I know, for example, you've been part of our Sandler family for many, many years. And I think that attributes a lot of our success to that, is them wanting to stay engaged and, continue to help them grow and get better.
And at the end of this show, I want to talk more about what you said about making your family life, personal life better, because there's a lot to that. And the reason there's a lot to that is you just talked a lot about why Sandler, the Ruby Group, is effective and strong, and Sandler's strong. And I'll throw my little plug in there. It's because it's not about closing. It's not what was the old movie, Closing is Coffee's for Closers. It's not hard sell. It's relationship. It's, do you really want to buy from me? If so, can I help you? It's really win-win based, helping people solve problems. And that's why Sandler's successful. And of course, you're doing it well at Ruby Group.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And we tell people all the time, we don't want anybody in a relationship with us where they don't feel like they're getting a huge return on their investment. And if you need to leave us, you leave us. And we don't have people leave us very often. It just doesn't happen. So, and I think it's all about making both their personal and their professional lives better through the communication skills that we teach, through the relationship building skills we teach, and not, as you said, not through closing and some tricky one-liner technique that somebody can learn, because that's not lasting.
Yeah, that's not the way you do it. And that's not why the good people should get into sales. And so that's a good litmus test, if nothing else. Tell me about you, Ken. Tell me about, let's talk about grit. Let's talk about the hard times. And I know, I'm a salesperson too. Tomorrow is going to be a hard time. Like, it's always a hard time, but there are things that you've overcome and your group has overcome. And I'd like to hear more about that. Let's talk about a dash of grit in your life.
Sure. So I would say, I started in manufacturing sales way back in my 20s. Just like everybody else, thousands of cold calls and all that tough, just grit to grow. And then grew into a leadership role in my company. And then we grew our business quite well. In 2008, I made the decision it was time for me to leave a family business. It was a very, very difficult decision.
Before or after the recession hit in 2008?
Just as about the time it started. So
wow.
It was, and it was a very difficult decision because I loved the family member that I worked for, but our visions were becoming very different. And I had some concerns and I didn't want to stand in his way. And so I made the decision to leave the company without another job, without another idea of what I was going to do. And I was, I think the heir apparent to potentially run that business at some point. And it was very, very difficult to do, but it was the right thing to do for me. Unfortunately, the company struggled after I left, and not because I left. It wasn't that. It was the recession, the industry we were in. We were in the hospitality industry, which got hit excessively hard during the recession. And so the company struggled. Quite honestly, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And at the time, I had a 2-year-old at home, and my wife was a stay-at-home mom, and savings started dwindling, and I decided to try to start a business and stay in the hospitality industry. And, the best thing I can say about that experience was I didn't lose my home.
That's the best thing.
Yeah, that's the best thing I could say.
Yeah,
I had heat and I had food for my kids, but outside of that, it was a nightmare for 3 years.
Was that commission sales only?
Yeah. So I started my own company, but it was basically just me in commission sales.
So before we talk about that, because I know that's a whole another beast, I'd like to go back to, because I think a lot of our listeners struggle with, am I in the right spot? Am I making the right decision? Is tomorrow as good as yesterday? And they try to figure out what to do next. You left a job where you were on the fast track and you were solid and locked in, and you made a decision to leave without something else. Tell me a little bit about that decision. What had to go into that? Was it an easy decision? Sometimes they are.
No.
Yeah. Tell me about that decision.
No, it was very difficult. I was working for an uncle who was married to my dad's younger sister. And it was, of course I loved him and knew him my whole life. And we just, at some point I think I knew before he did that we probably needed to part ways, because we just we didn't have the same vision for the company at the time. And we were kind of tugging against one another. And, one of the big challenges obviously was a hard decision, because I knew it was going to be a blow to the company. And I hoped and prayed that he would be okay and the company would be okay. But I also knew that I would have to have a conversation with my father, who was not aware. I didn't talk to him about the differences we had necessarily. And so all he looked at it was I was taking care of his little sister's, livelihood, with her husband's company. And so I knew that was going to be a tough decision. It was going to be a tough conversation I had to have with him to get him to understand why this was best for me. I was 38 years old at the time, so not a young person, and horribly difficult decision. But I think when I stopped sleeping at night, because I had so much anxiety about what was going on at work every day, and my wife saw it, and my stress level was through the roof. I knew, I knew God had some kind of plan for me, and that wasn't it at that point. And so I had to make that decision and then try to figure out what was next.
Do you think part of the plan that he had for you was to step out of that boat and just trust that it was going to be okay, trusting yourself, even though, I mean, you had a 2-year-old child at home, 38 years old, not right out of college. I mean, that's a tough road to hoe, and yet you made that plunge. Is that part of the thing that you had to learn?
Yeah, you do. And I think I learned it. One of the biggest lessons I learned out of that whole process. And then I had another decision I made 3 years later, which was, equally difficult, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But,
yep.
But I think one of the things I've learned through this whole thing is you have to figure out what you're passionate about in life from a business perspective. You have to figure out, what do I love to do? And if I figure out what I love to do, my belief system is you'll figure out how to make the kind of money you want to make at it if you love it and you're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I was really holding on to. That was not what I wanted to do. That's not where I wanted to end my career. And through no fault of my uncle's, it wasn't an industry I was necessarily passionate about. I love selling and I love leading salespeople, not necessarily in that space. And it's like, okay, go figure out what's next. But I know that wasn't it.
Yeah. And then when you started the hospitality business, it didn't go well. Tell me more. Let's rekindle that conversation.
So I started a small company on my own, not really competing against my family's business, but similar space.
Okay.
And they're just in 2008, 9, and 10 in the hospitality industry, whether it was hotels being built or renovated, restaurants being built or renovated, or apartment buildings that needed products that we would sell, things like that. Nobody was buying. No. And probably the bottom, if you will, during that 3 years of running that business was, or not the bottom, the realization of how bad things truly were.
Mm-hmm.
I flew to St. Louis and I went down in the evening to the hotel restaurant. I was the only person in the restaurant on a Tuesday night at the most prestigious business hotel in downtown St. Louis. And I asked the waiter where everybody was. And he said, you know what? We have 19% occupancy tonight.
Wow.
And it's normally sold out every day. And that was just a realization of how bad things really were during that 3-year period. Now, fortunately, but unfortunately for me, what kind of led me to move in the direction I am now, one of the things, I was a longtime Sandler client myself, from 1998 to 2008, working in my family business. I attended the Ruby Group training and had become passionate about Sandler in late 2009 during my 3-year independent contractor run, if you will. I had a gentleman reach out to me and ask me if I would be willing to recruit salespeople in territories for him, independent sales reps in the hotel industry, and then go travel and do ride-alongs and teach them how to sell. And he paid me a little bit of money, but most of it was commission-based. Again, and it was a 1-year contract. And so in late 2009 to 2010, my family and I made the decision that I was going to be on the road every other week. And my son was 3 at the time. And so I would leave on Monday and come home on Friday and travel with these salespeople, recruit them, and then travel with them and coach them and teach them how to sell. And invariably, I was teaching them Sandler at some level.
Yeah.
The good news was it really sparked my fire for this is what I need to be doing. The bad news was I was on primarily commission and nobody was buying for the hotel industry. And so I was making almost no money through that whole time.
Yeah. So were you doing that during the 3 years or after the 3 years?
During the 3 years. That was part of what I did.
So you're running 2 gigs at the same time.
Pretty much 2 gigs.
And staying away from home 1 week, every other week.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So how did that make you feel during that time when you were doing that and constantly hitting your face up against a brick wall? What are you thinking then?
Well, I mean, it was pure survival mode. I mean, for my family, for me, I mean, we sold one of our cars and was down to one car and she would take me to the airport every other week and pick me up. And she managed our 3-year-old at the time. And I was just looking to make enough commission to, get on the other side of this. And I was starting to open my eyes to the idea of I've got to get out of this industry.
Yeah.
And the reality was, and one of my biggest business regrets, if you will, was in 2008 when I left the family business. I probably should have came to the Ruby Group right then. And Mike Jones, my partner, had said to me, you've been doing this longer than I have. You need to come do this. And I was, quite frankly, fear got in the way.
Yeah.
Fear got in the way.
Does that.
Leaving an industry I was in since I was 24.
And you know what's interesting? I'm just sitting here thinking, you said to yourself or to us, God had a plan for you. And you stepped out of one position and started up almost the same job. You just kind of did it yourself. And at the same time, someone came along and said, hey, why don't you come be a sales trainer for my guys in the industry? It's almost like God has a plan, but I picked the wrong one.
Yeah, I did.
But he doesn't leave us alone, does he? He's like, oh, come on, dummy. You hit the wrong button. Come over this way instead. Is that kind of the way, is looking back on it? Is that what happened?
Yeah, for sure. And the funny thing is, had the economy not been so bad, the gentleman that I did that contract for, where I had recruited probably the best independent rep sales force in that industry that you could possibly imagine. And had they been able to perform like they could have performed, had it not been the horrific recession we were in, the amount of money that I was set up to make in that role, they would have made it a permanent contract. And I'd probably still be doing that. And it would have never found my way here. So the blessing in disguise was the fact that the economy was so bad that even as good as I was doing recruiting, and every single company in that industry said, you have created the greatest independent rep sales force across the country that any of us could ever hope for.
Yep.
Because I would sell them. I'd recruit them on this company being one of their lines, but nobody was buying. And so it's been, that was almost my blessing in disguise to force me to get out of that industry.
Now, you and I both know that you don't fail until you quit. So you have to fail to win. So I don't mind saying this to you. You're now, I think, if I'm doing my math right, a little over 40 years old. You've failed in the sales industry a couple of times. Mm-hmm. Through or with no fault of your own. I'm not, I don't go look back. I mean, we all do things. And now you jump back into sales. I'm wondering, how did that go originally? Was it an instant success? Like all of a sudden your passion took over and away you went? Or was it still hard? I know what you do is not easy.
So, interesting story of what transitioned me to this business, which was June of 2011, when I officially started here. I had built a little bit of a book of business in that previous company. I had a relative of mine that was interested in potentially first selling for me and then eventually taking over that business, and offered me just a little bit of money for it, not a lot. My wife was doing the books for us, the books for our business. And I remember there was a day that I was at home and she came out from doing the books. And part of the problem with the books was we would sell things to general contractors. Well, general contractors are sometimes famous for not paying on time.
Yeah. Cash flow is king there.
Yeah. And even worse was in 2010, they wouldn't pay on time. And
or at all.
Or at all. And I landed a very large contract, which got us through 3 to 6 months of expenses for our family. And it took me about 120 days to get paid. And I had to pay my subcontractors before that. And my wife came out and she said, I'm not having any fun. I don't think you're having any fun. You need to do something different. Yeah. And she said, there's a person that I know that we can trust. And I think you should go talk to him. And it was Mike Jones. And the reason she made that comment was because when I left in 2008 from the family business, and a lot of my family members didn't know the whole story and didn't really talk to me very much for a little while, I got a handwritten note from Mike in the mail that just said, I know it was a difficult decision, but it was the right move. And if there's anything I can ever do, you reach out to me and I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And so I went and talked to Mike and then decided to jump into this business in June of 2011.
Yeah.
Now, this business creates another set of challenges. It is 100% commission with no base salary and no clients coming in. So you're coming in at zero.
Yeah.
And at the time in June of 2011, when I started here, my son was now 5. I now have a daughter who was 6 months old at the time. And I had found out about 6 months before that my dad had stage 4 cancer. And I was his sole support network. And so I started this job and started trying to sell and build a book of business. And I will tell you, this is by far the most difficult thing I've ever done. It took me twice as long to have some success as I thought it would. It is a slow process. And it was twice as difficult as I thought it would be. I actually thought I knew how to sell until I got into this business. And then it created a lot of challenges.
So how did you do it? How were you able to overcome that gap?
Well, here's the thing. My wife has been around me since 2003, and I've been around Sandler since 1998. So consequently, by default, she's been around Sandler since 2003.
Okay.
I start coming into the office, and Mike tried to do his best to give me kind of a behavioral roadmap, if you will, of what you need to do to be successful in terms of how many times you have to dial the phone and have conversations and meet people and network and all that stuff. And you try your best to stay on that track, but you get frustrated.
Yeah.
And
fall into old habits and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of Fridays I would come home and say to my wife, no paycheck this time. And her response to me every single time, and I give her a ton of credit, was, did you do your behaviors?
Really?
Did you do the things that you know you have to do for us to ultimately make it?
You were married to a sales trainer.
I was. Yeah. That's her being around Sandler, holding me accountable. And thank God for her, because that kind of kept me from wanting to jump off the cliff, so to speak. And then, literally she said to me, I need you to go to work and do your behaviors and do everything you have to do and take your dad to his chemo treatments. And I got everything else.
Wow.
I'll handle the kids. I'll handle the house. I'll handle everything I can handle. And you just do that. And I lost my father about 5 months later. And then just kept grinding. I think the first year here, I doubt if I made $30,000 in the whole year. And just kept at it. And then it, doubled in year 2 and doubled in year 4. And in terms of my production and it just took a lot longer than I thought it would take. But like I said to you earlier, I knew this was what I was meant to do. And I knew I had a passion for it. I had a passion for the coaching and the training and the selling and the consulting and working in different industries and getting to see different business problems and help companies along the way. And I just knew it was something that was for me. I just had to figure out. And like I said, if you find something you're passionate about, I think you figure out a way to make the kind of money you want to make ultimately. And it takes a long time.
Well, passion is one thing, but commission sales with zero coming in and nothing to bring home on a Friday is another. And
Mm-hmm.
and what keeps someone like you, and you might say Mike, and you might say your wife, and I bet there's a lot of truth to that. But what keeps someone like you from just taking the office job, getting into operations, or doing something that doesn't require, that pays a salary, that gets you home on time, that you're never going to get rich, it's not your passion, but at least you're not broke? What keeps you from making that decision to go against your passions and stick with your gut?
I think could be some stubbornness involved.
Okay.
But I think, there's people out there that like to win, and there's people out there that hate to lose. And I'm a hate to lose person. And when I come home at night, we have a very blessed to have a very nice home and a very nice neighborhood and a very affluent suburb that my children get to attend good schools. And I was not going to look my wife or kids in the eye and say, I didn't make it, we got to downsize. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And the grind that it would take to make that, I wasn't going to fail. And that was just my mindset. So call it stubborn. Maybe I should have went and did something else. And I've had some offers in the last, 5-6 years from clients and from other things that my wife and I shook our head and say, this is hard to pass up.
Mm-hmm.
And it really came down to passion, to say that this is what I was meant to do. I did get some really strong advice from a mentor of mine who's also a client, but when I had a very sizable offer to leave the company, I went to the mentor and I said, tell me why I should or shouldn't do this.
Mm-hmm.
He very, very quickly said, do you have a passion for this new thing? And I said, not really. And he said, are you where you want to be at the current thing? And I said, not really. And he said, are there people in Sandler that are making the kind of money that you want to make and having the success that you ultimately want to have? And I said, yep, there are. Do you think they're dramatically better than you, that you can never be that good?
Wow.
And I said, no, not really. I mean, they're great, no disrespect, but are they dramatically better than me? No. And so he said, so what's the difference? And in every case of the people I looked at, they had just been doing it longer.
Yeah.
And so it just made me realize, just keep doing what you're doing and ultimately you'll get there.
Yeah.
And it just takes a while to build that reputation, if you will.
I can't get this final question out of my head, Ken, and you don't have to answer it, or you can answer it. There's Mike Jones and there's your wife, and you had to trust Mike. Your wife brought you to him as someone that you can trust, and she supported you 100% along the way. I don't think you get where you're at without both. But if you had to rank the influence, people who are out there trying to make a decision, who do they trust? Who do they rely on? If you had to rank the influence, where do you fall there? It's a hard question. I'm sorry, but that's my job.
No, it's a great question. It's a great question. Well, I think the number one person I had to rely on was me. And so in not in a selfish way, but in a way that, like, I had to believe in my mind that if I came to this role, that there was not, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I knew I could make it. It was just a matter of when, right? And then without my wife, would I have walked and taken that corporate job at some point without her urging me to continue to stay focused? Probably not. I may have considered taking that other thing at some point. Without Mike and working with somebody that you trust implicitly, that you know is not going to take advantage of you if you have success or whatever, that's a big red flag. Like when I hear companies, I had a coaching session with a salesperson yesterday, and he said, I got a new boss and I have some concerns whether I can work with this person or not. And my advice was, did you voice those concerns to him yet? And he said, no. And I said, well, you owe it to yourself to voice the concerns. And then if the person doesn't care and you still can't trust them, then you have a tough decision to make about your future. So I can't stack rank those two, but I had to have a belief and faith in myself in this role. And then I had to have the support of both of those people, the trust in Mike and the sense of urgency from my wife and pushing me to do what she knew I was supposed to do too. Or I wouldn't have made it.
No, you wouldn't have. And you need all those things and your belief in God as well, which you've brought up a couple of times. Now, I'm wondering, I'll be funny and joke. Now that you're successful, I know you're just, feet up on the desk and packing it in every day, right? What's the future look like for Ken Guest? What's the next hurdle? Where do you have to show grit next to get where you want to go?
I think the future for me and for our company, more importantly, I'm very fortunate having done this now 10 years. I get plenty of referrals and introductions to people and opportunities for additional business and things like that. And I don't have a shortage of that. And that has been going on for 2 or 3 years now. And I think that's going to continue. So I don't think there's necessarily grit that I need to, to continue that, other than just to say, don't get complacent and don't get comfortable. And I will say this, probably my biggest regret in business was when I was about 30 to 32 years old and started having a fairly high degree of success in my family business and doing pretty well financially. I took my foot off the gas and I started coasting a little bit because I didn't need it. So, and I thought to myself, you dummy, don't ever do that again. And so I'll never do that again. But I think what the future holds for, more importantly, for our franchise and our office, the grit that we need is to allow and support our team members, the other trainers on our team that are salespeople, to help them get there faster than it took me. That takes a lot of determination, a lot of coaching, a lot of guidance. We've always said this. Mike said, I just want you to get to where I got faster than it took me. I said it with Jordan, who followed me, and so on and so forth with the rest of our team. We just want people to come on and have wonderful systems and processes in place that support them and allow them to be successful quicker. So that's our biggest challenge right now that I think we need to get from here to there with.
Yep. Well, you're getting there, and I know nothing makes Mike Jones or you more upset than to be told you're number 5. So you've got just a couple of rungs to go, but I know you won't quit. A quick word about my company, Spire Marketing. We are here to help your business grow. Ken mentioned that we have been part of Sandler Training for a long time, and I'm very proud of that relationship. And the one thing I want to tell you as a perhaps potential customer out there, I don't want your business if it's not a good fit for you and for me. I will tell you no. And Ken will have said that they helped me to learn that. Not every business is a good fit for the other. And it's up to you to find a partner, someone that believes in your success, someone that believes they can help you and that delivers that on the other side. And it's important for you to like them too. All I could say is if you're interested in finding out more about us, reach out and we'll have a discussion and see if it makes sense to talk further. Did I do that right, Ken?
You did it right, Brian. Very well done.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to mention before we left, you brought up the idea of when people say you've helped me personally as much as in sales. Tell me, I know what that means, and I wanted to talk about it. Tell me what it means to you quickly. Why is that? Why do you help people personally? Because I think it's so important.
Well, I think it's 2 things. I think one, a lot of the communication skill training that we teach is certainly things that can apply at home. How you communicate with your spouse, with your children. It's certainly a big difference. And obviously we hope that if we help them be more successful in their career, it's going to impact their personal lives with their finances too, if they're having more success in sales. Mm-hmm. So it's really twofold, but primarily it's, if I can interact with my child or my spouse in a different way because of something I learned, that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. It's the idea of listening as opposed to talking. It's the idea of caring as opposed to just getting your own way and doing the right things at all times. And I think that's really what it comes down to. So thank you, Ken Guest, for sharing your story and your success. And thank you from my heart for all the difference that you and everyone at Sandler has made for me and my family and my career and my company, Spire Marketing. So we do appreciate this, you're being a part of the show. Ken, thank you for being a guest on Dash of Grit.
Brian, I appreciate it as always, and really enjoyed the time with you.
That's Ken Guest. He is the Chief Revenue Officer and partner at the Ruby Group, Sandler Training in Akron, Ohio. Look up his books. Look him up on LinkedIn. He'll share great things with you. Ken, before I let you go, if someone wanted to reach out to you and say, hey, turn me into the next Ken Guest, if they wanted to learn more about Sandler Training, how would they do that?
A couple of ways. They're welcome to email me at ken.guest, GUEST, @sandler.com. And again, we could schedule a conversation and I'd say the same thing that Brian would say. Who knows if we can help or not until we talk about it and see. Or they're welcome to look at our website at the Ruby Group, THERubyGroup.Sandler.com.
This is Dash of Grit. Thank you to Ken Guest for being our guest. We do this once a week. You'll find it wherever you find podcasts. Take a look at the Dash of Grit show and find some past shows. In fact, Ken mentioned Mike Jones, one of the greatest Dash of Grit episodes ever. Mike is one of the greatest people ever, and his story will knock you on your back, which is exactly where he came from as well. So I look forward to the next time, and I hope you do too. Until then, keep on winning, and away we go.
This is a Dash of Grit. Recipes for success from courageous leaders who overcome challenges and build great things.